Hello friends, it's Ramana here. This is part 3 of my broadcast talking about Hinduism and also about answering questions which have been sent to me through email, and some messages have been conveyed to me over phone. And this is slightly different from what was being heard a little earlier. I'll take it up a little later. To begin with, let me start with the portion of what we are going to talk about today, that is Vedas. What exactly are the Vedas? We have talked about what exactly are the tools of knowledge when we were speaking last time in the last broadcast. I'll try to make some of the readers have come back to me, including some of my closest friends who are right now in United States, that the subject is slightly heavy, and they had asked me to make it a little lighter and also make it slow. They said that my closest friend informed me that I was going a little too fast for an ordinary man to follow through. So I will take it a little slow and try to make it as light as possible this present broadcast onwards. But the fact of the matter is, Hinduism, as it deals with life in all seriousness, and Sanatana Dharma is not something which has been written to gain followers. It has been expressed to help people realizing oneself and try to understand the meaning of life. After all, philosophy is nothing but an attempt to answer the basic three questions. One is, where are we from? What do we do here? And where do we go from here? These are the primary three questions that we address in philosophy. But a philosophy becomes redundant if it is not going to be useful for us to follow in life. So, Hinduism through Vedas try to convey what people have felt in trying to realize one's own self and trying to solve life's problems by hands-on methods. To know what exactly Veda is, before that, let us find out what exactly is knowledge. Knowledge may be defined only as awareness, because when you become aware of something, you gain some information. Whether that information is correct or incorrect is at this point of time is redundant. So also, whether the information which you have is right or wrong is a moral judgment, which again is superfluous. So ultimately, when you are trying to talk about knowledge, what you are trying to talk about is only awareness of what you have in your mind, or what you see, or what you perceive. For instance, if we want to know what we are aware of, we need initially two things. One is ourselves. Let us call this a subject. And the thing which we want to see is called the object. It is not enough if the subject and object are present. There has to be a relationship. I normally tell people, nowadays you find a lot of people not getting married. It's getting delayed. The reason is they are not getting connected. That's all. There is a boy, there is a girl, they have to be connected. As in knowledge and awareness, when these two things are present, when the boy is here, when the girl is here, they have to get connected. Only then the marriage can take place. Similarly, if an object were to exist in a different place and you are staying in a separate place and there is no connection, then the knowledge does not take place. So, in essence, awareness, here we mean is, what we mean is later date, we will call it as knowledge. This awareness is possible when the subject and object are present and they are related as also. They are also related. Once they are related, the knowledge dawns on you. That is, if I have a pen before me, I am seeing the pen. I am the subject and the pen is the object. When I am seeing the act of seeing happen, then I say that there is a pen. This is the beginning of knowledge. As I said earlier, the knowledge becomes correct or incorrect, right or wrong, is a later subjective interpretation. Now, what exactly is this knowledge about and where does this come from? Now, as yearly, I am trying to quote from Western sources because we as Indians have a tendency to trust more the Western resources than our own resources. Even though I am going to talk about our own resources, let me just quote from the Greek philosopher. The following quotation has been attributed to two people. One is Zeno and another is Socrates. About 400 BC was Zeno. Then he was saying, knowledge can be from either of these two sources. One is either from the subject or from the object. Or to put it for a common man to understand, knowledge has to come from the outside or you should have it by yourself. Right? So, when you have a knowledge from your own, if it has to come from subject itself, since you do not have knowledge, you cannot recognize this as a knowledge. If the knowledge has to come from outside also, you will not be able to recognize it as knowledge because again you cannot recognize it. So in both cases, knowledge is impossible. So this goes to prove how logic, when extended, will recoil on itself. So the best source Indians have found out, they have found out through various sources and tools of knowledge, perception, inference, that is deduction, and upamana, that is simile, then testimony, intuition. People have found out that two things are most important more than anything else. One is experience, anubhava, and the next one is intuition. As far as intuition is concerned, it cannot be proved. Only a man can one who feels intuition can understand what intuition is all about. So when you experience something, these experiences give you information which you can't really express, especially in the case of things that are related to your emotions and passions. And this also applies to your understanding of reality. So, when people started trying to understand what the whole life is about, where are we from, what are we, and where do we go from here, when they started searching for answers, they found out certain answers. These answers are different for everybody. Each one has a different approach to understanding things, as things present itself. When I look at something, it appeals to me in a certain way, and the same thing when you see it, it appeals to you in a different way. So your experience and the anubhava you get from it, the pleasures you derive from it, the lessons you learn from it are totally different from what I would get. So the experiences one gets from inquiring into the nature of reality are diverse because people are numerous. So numerous experiences which lead to the realization of the supreme reality, which in Vedas, in Sanskrit, is called Brahman, the reality. That reality is expressed in the Vedas. So, Veda, as I said earlier, means to know. It comes from the Sanskrit root With means to know. To know what? At a later day, this becomes very complicated. Who knows what? This is the height of Advaita. Maybe little later. Now we are in the very, very preliminary stages of Indian philosophy, trying to understand the basis of Indian philosophy. The basis, as I said, is Veda. So, since numerous people, they are called rishis. Rishis are people, very loosely translated into English, means seers. Those who see the unseen are seers. We just say, I also see, it's not seen. Seers are those people who see things which are normally not seen by others. They grasp it. See, this is something which cannot be empirically, practically explained to you unless you experience yourself. When people say about Veda, that is, it is apaurushaya, it is not made by any man, and it is anadi, it is timeless. The meaning is that it is something which one experiences and which one cannot explain it to others. Because an experience has no beginning and no end. When you start thinking about life's experiences, where does the experience begin? Where does the experience end? Just to think, for food for thought, where does yesterday end, today starts, and today ends, and tomorrow starts? Try to answer this very logically. This is also an ontological question. That is, the origin of the cosmos and the world is called ontology. You will get the answer the same as you would get in inquiring into the nature of Krishna. So when so many people have started experiencing the reality, they have explained it, they grasped it. Since it is not something very, something which can be very really explained, they have grasped it by intuition. So Vedas are said to have been captured, these Veda mantras are said to have been captured in the form of Shabda from the ether, Akasa. As all of you know, we have in Indian philosophy earth, water, fire, air and ether. Of the Panchabhutas, ether is Akasa. Akasa is slightly more than ether. Slightly, the attributes are slightly more than that of ether. So it is being grasped from the air, these mantras. These mantras have been grasped by the individual rishis, and they have been transmitted to people over thousands of years. Since it is an expression, since it is an experience that cannot be very easily explained, it was not written. But people try to express it in oral tradition. Sometimes you may not be able to write something, but you may be able to express it. In the case of Vedas, since they have been grasped as sounds from ether, the rishis have grasped them and gave it to the world. Thus came about the Vedas. These Vedas, in Puranas it has been explained. The Vedas are the Usvasa and Vishwasa of Brahma, the creator. That is, the inhalation and the exhalation of Brahma, the creator. Inhalation and exhalation are the process of breathing. For any speech, inhalation and exhalation is necessary. This indirectly indicates that Vedas are from the universal sound, primordial sound, which is Om. The basic principle, underlying principle, when you are trying to make it as a Shabda, it is Om. This is also expressed in the Vedas very clearly. In the Upanishads you will find. In Bhagavad Gita, these are the three letters are joined together. A, O, Ma. They form the word Om, the Shabda Om. When you start pronouncing these words, you will find A starts from your mouth, U starts from your throat, Ma starts from your pit of the stomach. These are the only three sources from where the sounds can emanate. Based on this, the various experiences have been brought forth And later, thousands of people were there. Thousands and lakhs of people were there, out of which a few people who attempted to realize reality have experienced reality. After experiencing reality, when they started conveying it, it became a vast pool of reserve knowledge. This reserve knowledge has been compiled. It was later compiled by Veda Vyasa. Veda Vyasa is reported to have compiled the Vedas, and also he has been responsible for writing the Puranas also compiled. He is only a compiler, he has not written anything. As far as Indian tradition is concerned, most of the, if not all, most of the treatises in Hinduism are only compiled because they are automatic. They are experiences. Experiences do not belong to one individual because it is out there in the cosmos. Only when you respond it, you get an experience and you share it. When Vyasa started compiling all these experiences together, and they came to be known as the Vedas. These Vedas, now whatever we are talking about, Veda is only theoretical for classification. We are classifying Vedas into many parts. Try to explain it to enable us to understand, because it is quite vast, right? That's why it is being simplified. So, to speak fundamentally, Vedas have 4 parts. One is Samhitas, the second is called Samhitas, then Aranyakas, Brahmanas, and Sannyasa. The 4 stages are given. Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads. Now these 4 correspond to 4 stages of human life. One is called Brahmachari, that is one who is unmarried, bachelor. The second is Grihastha, one who is married. Third, the Vanaprastha, the man after having reached a certain age, had begotten children, enters the responsibility of running the family to his eldest son as is the Indian tradition, concentrates on the reality by going away into a forest along with his wife if she wants it. This is Aranyaka. And the 4th is called Sannyasi. He becomes a sannyasi. And for each stage, there is a particular portion is recommended. But at the earliest age, when a boy starts his Upanayana, which is normally to be done at the age of 5, normally to complete the whole process of learning the Vedas is about 12 years. So by the time at Guru's house, at Guru's feet, by the time he completes 17 years, when he is ready for marriage, or he would have been married a little earlier before completion also, he would have, then he knows everything what is to be learned about the Vedas. Not that he would have completely understood, he has learned. So there are certain duties to be performed as a brahmachari, grihastha, as a vanaprastha, and as a sannyasi. So when he becomes a grihastha also, he is ready to execute all the responsibilities that go with running a family. Then the Vedas also contain information which you have to perform when you reach the vanaprastha state, and this is expressed in the Aranyakas. Then after these 3, then you have one more. This is Upanishad. When you have the Upanishad, what happens is the Upanishad is the end of the Vedas. Upanishad means sitting nearby. It has to be learned by sitting at the feet of the Guru. The highest philosophy, highest abstract thought are transferred from the Guru to the disciple at this stage. So now we have Samhitas, which first part is Samhita. They contain the benediction, prayers addressed to various gods. These are the Samhitas. The second part is the Brahmanas, the duties that are to be done by all the 4 stages of life. That is Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasi. The third is Aranyaka, the duty that has to be performed when he becomes Vanaprastha or semi-retired. The last Upanishad is something which has to be done when one becomes a sannyasi. But here in Hinduism, one important point is that Hinduism never tells you that you should run away from your responsibilities. One has to go through the entire process because unless you know most of the things in life personally by experiencing, you will not be fit enough to understand the implications of reality, or you can understand the severity of the samsara sagara, the ocean of life. So it is always recommended, and also it is stated very clearly, the highest ashrama for any human is that of Grihastha, not sannyasi, not brahmacharya. These are expressed. Bhishma was an exception. It was not. It is not a general rule. So right now we have Samhita, Brahmanas, Aranyaka, and Upanishad, and these correspond to four stages: Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasi. And again, after having divided this into four, there are four Vedas. One is called the Rigveda, the other is called the Yajurveda, and the third is called Samaveda, and the fourth is Atharva Veda. Rigveda contains, Rigveda, Ruk is a Chandas. Chandas is a meter. The prayers were written in a specific meter that is called Rig. So Rig contains, it is reported to be the oldest literature ever known to man is the Rigveda. It has been dated as 5000 BC, with which I refer. I have written very clearly. It's approximate, as of, with the available evidence, it goes back to 1 million years. With archaeological evidence, I have written. Kindly check my article, Million-Year-Old Tamil Quotes Vedas. Please Google this term, Million-Year-Old Tamil, Ramanan 50, you will get the relevant information. So, these four divisions of Vedas are there. In the Rigveda, you have Rigveda Samhita, Rigveda Brahmana, Rigveda Aranyaka, and Rigveda Upanishad. Similarly, you have Yajurveda Samhita, Yajurveda Brahmana, Yajurveda Aranyaka, and Yajurveda Upanishad. Similarly, you have Samaveda and Atharva Veda. In general, Samaveda is, let me stress on it, is Rigveda set to tune, set to music, set to tone. So it has to be in tone in a particular way. And this is a very, very special Veda, which is reputed to be very dear to Lord Shiva himself. Now we have two. Then again, we have further divisions. The division, excepting for Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda, they are all only one in number. But as far as Yajurveda is concerned, there is a division of two: Shukla Yajur and Krishna Yajur. Shukla Yajur is one, white. It is called white Yajurveda, and the second is Krishna Yajurveda, black Yajur. As I said earlier, Vedas speak two types. There are two, broadly you can divide. The whole, what is being conveyed in the Vedas are two types. One is Karma Kanda, the performance of rituals and duties, and the second is Jnana Kanda. Jnana Kanda means understanding the world and knowledge about reality, about self, the union and thereof. This is Jnana Kanda. Karma Kanda is one part, Jnana Kanda is one part. Normally, even though Yajurveda Samhita contains all the Samhita as well, Karma Kanda is found more in Yajurveda. So when we are talking about Yajurveda, there is a legend goes, Sage Yagyavalkya, when he was under his guru, when he learned the entire Vedas. After he has learned it, and he was a disciple there. Those days, all the great acharyas used to meet often and discuss about the various aspects of Vedas. At one point of time, the Guru of Yajnavalkya, please find out who the Guru of Yajnavalkya is. I can tell you, but I would encourage you to go out and find out so that it will expose you to more things in Indian philosophy. Since he could not make the meeting because he had some other engagement, he deputed some other Sishya, disciple. Then Yajnavalkya went to his Guru and asked him, why should he go? I will go. Then the Guru told him, no, I am deputing him, you please go. This gentleman again repeatedly said, I will go, I will go. Then the Guru got angry and told him, you have committed two crimes. Number one is that you are talking back to your Guru. Number two, you are disobeying my orders. So, you are not qualified to be my disciple. Get out. Then Yajnavalkya said, fine, if you say so, I will also go. But the Guru, he had an ulterior motive in revealing something to the world. With the purpose, he said, okay Yajnavalkya, you can go out of my Gurukulam on the condition that whatever you have learned from me till date, vomit everything and go. Then Yajnavalkya assumed form of a dove and vomited whatever he has learned, whatever portions he has learned from his teacher, Vedas. So, those portions that have come from his mouth are called Taittiriya, because he is from the word, from the dove, because it has come from the dove, it is called a Taittiriya. Today you have a Taittiriya Samhita, Taittiriya Upanishad. Yajnavalkya is a great saint. Actually, because after he was excommunicated, now I am validating it with latest findings in archaeology and local legends in Russia. He had an ashram in Russia. And Yajnavalkya, since it has not come from the mouth of a Guru, the portions which he has followed, which he has expressed, they were called Krishna Yajur, because since it is black, so because it has not come from the Guru, through the Guru, without the sanction of the Guru, it is called Krishna Yajurveda. But because it is not, it doesn't have the approval of the Guru, the mantras you find in Krishna Yajur, Krishna Yajur will be, Shukla Yajur will be more than what you find in. As Shukla Yajur was founded by, so this, I think there is an error I have made here. So, when Yajnavalkya made this, the mantra in Shukla Yajur will be more elaborate than what we have. The Krishna Yajur is what we have today, and that is being mostly practiced in South. Now, as of now, we have covered what exactly is the basic background of Vedas, what are its divisions, how it corresponds to the various stages of one's life. With this, I will try to proceed further in the next broadcast. Thank you.